Hello, this is Assistant Professor Randy Minton of Thomas University, and today what I want to do is take you through the continuing problem, this time through chapter 4. But let me recap for a minute and let me tell you how we got to where we're at. We started out in chapter 1 doing some journal entries, and we did all the journal entries up, and then we came down and we did a trial balance. And the trial balance, excuse me, I shouldn't say that, we posted to the ledger. That's this guy over here. We posted all these accounts to the ledger, all of these journal entries, and then we came back, and the next step for us was to do some adjusting entries, and those were the adjusting entries where we had to adjust for some accounts receivable and fees earned and insurance expense and so forth. And now what they want us to do is they want us to close the books. So let me walk back over here to the trial balance and just kind of remind you what we did. We first had to post the adjusting entries. And I've got a little thing built into this spreadsheet so that when I do this they automatically post. And let me kind of remind you what we did. Here was the accounts receivable, and this is from the journal over here, the accounts receivable adjusting entry, and that was for the excess hours that we worked in excess of 80. And of course we recognized some fees, and then we had some supplies that were used up and some insurance that was used up. We had to recognize the depreciation expense, and the accumulated depreciation, which is a contra asset, goes against the asset and therefore a normal credit. And then we had to recognize that we had earned some of the fees that we received in advance in the first part of July. And finally, we had some wages that we incurred that we had not yet paid for, but the end of the month had arrived, so we had to accrue for those. So once we did that, we posted all of these to the adjusted trial balance, or the adjustment column, I should say, of the trial balance. And as you can see, as you kind of walk your way down here, 745, 745, 225, 225, 50, 50, 140, so forth. And the only one that's different, just so that if any of you are trying to retrace your way through these numbers, we do have a consolidation here on the fees earned, which is this number and this number. So it isn't two entries, instead it's a single entry that I've made here. Okay, so and I'm going to just whip down here at the bottom, and you can see that we're in balance. We were in balance over here, we're in balance here. The next thing that we had to do was we had to extend the unadjusted trial balance through the adjusting entries and come up with an adjusted trial balance. And again, I did that with a just a little indication over here of my desire to go ahead and do that at this point. And you can see that I have now an adjusted trial balance, and the adjusted trial balance, of course, is still in balance. Okay, and so that brings us up to, and that takes us through chapter 3 and brings us up to where we are right now in chapter 4. Now, what I did, if you looked at the last trial balance that we had and worksheet that we had, we did not have these two additional headings of income statement and balance sheet, but we now have those, so we need to go ahead and create our income statement and balance sheet. And what we're going to do, and if I looked at the instructions down here, I'm supposed to create, and I've already done some of this work, I'm supposed to create an income statement for the month ended July the 31st, 2016, a statement of retained earnings for that month, and then the balance sheet. Okay, so and that runs all the way over here, and at this point we don't have any numbers in there because we don't have any indication of that yet on our worksheet. So how do we get to these numbers on the balance sheet? Well, it's really fairly simple. What we would do is we would take whatever's in the adjusted trial balance that is a balance sheet item, and if I look at this thing, let's just come over here for a second. Everything from dividends up will go over here to the balance sheet. Everything from fees earned will wind up on the income statement. Now, typically we do the income statement before the balance sheet. And so all I'm going to do is just simply move these numbers over to the appropriate column over here on the income statement. And I believe that that's this guy right here. No, take it back. That's balance sheet. And I really want to do the income statement first, only because the income statement is the way that we would normally prepare these things. And even though it's probably more efficient to do the balance sheet first because it comes first, I want to do the income statement first because I want you to get in the habit of understanding that the income statement is the first financial statement that we prepare. And I'll show you why here in just a little bit. Anyway, I'm going to just put a Y in here. And as you can see, all that happened was whatever was on the adjusted trial balance, it just moved over to the income statement side. And we started with fees earned. That's the first income statement account, and worked our way down through all of the expenses. Okay, now I want to bring you down to here, and I want to show you that the fees earned, okay, the revenue side was higher than the expense side. So what I have to do is I have to balance this, and in order for me to balance it, I'm just simply going to take this number here and subtract this number here and get this number here. And then when I add this and this, I get to this number here. And now we're in balance on this side. Now I'll warn you up front that the balance on the balance sheet side is not going to be the same. However, what will be the same is this guy. And this is your net income. Okay? And so what we're going to do is we would actually have a post-closing trial balance that would get rid of all of these guys plus the dividend and replace us with retained earnings, because remember, we would normally have a retained earnings account sitting there, but this is our first month of operation, so we had 0 in retained earnings. We don't have anything there yet and don't have an account sitting there for it. Okay, so that takes care of the income side, and again, here's your number for net income. We know it's net income, and the reason we do is because we had to make an entry here on the outside of this worksheet, and here's the other outside of the worksheet. So if I have an entry here and an entry here, that means I had net income, and you can see it because here's my revenue stream and here are all my expenses. The difference is positive, okay, so it's a net income. Now we're going to do the balance sheet side. And we did the same thing. We're simply moving these numbers over. If they're a balance sheet item, they go over here to the balance sheet. Now, everything on the balance sheet is a permanent item except for this one, okay? And this one gets eliminated in closing. And you'll see that in a minute, how that goes away. Actually, you won't see how it goes away, but you'll see how it's used. So now, all I'm doing is adding up these two columns, and I get a number here and a number here. I have more assets than I do liabilities at this point, and equity. The difference here goes to the outside, and that means that we have the same number here that was required to make a balance that we had here. Okay? Alright, so at this point, what I would really do is probably come through here and just to clean this up a little bit, I'd probably make this here like this. I'm going to get rid of the zeros because that just clutters the thing up a little bit and makes it wider and harder for me to get everything on the screen. Okay, so what you see now is I'm simply moving them, if they're balance sheet items, over to the balance sheet, if they're income statement items, over to the income statement, and then if we've done everything right, then our net income will be the balancing number on the outside here. If we had a net loss, we'd have two numbers on the inside. Alright, now just to go real quick to the top of page 209, you can see on the continuing problem that the net income is $4,955, and that is what our net income is. So we're good. Okay, so now we want to come down and we want to create the income statement, the statement of retained earnings, and the balance sheet. Now, it's really simple. All I'm going to do is I'm going to move the numbers from the balance sheet on the worksheet, from the income statement and the balance sheet for that matter, but the income statement on the worksheet down here to the income statement that's more formalized. Okay, and again, I've got this stuff all worked out, so if I hit a Y here, that's going to bring this on down. And here's your fees earned that came straight from the worksheet. Here are your wages, your office rent expense, and so forth and so on, until we get down here to a total number for expenses. And I'm going to put a top border in here so that you can see it better. That's your total expenses. This is your total fees earned. The difference between this number and this number is this number right here. So we're still good because that income statement number came directly from here. Okay, so you see that those two numbers are equal. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is do the statement of retained earnings. Okay, now the statement of retained earnings starts out with the beginning retained earnings, which in this case, as I mentioned before, is 0. We would add the net income, we would subtract any dividends, and that would leave us with ending retained earnings. Now, you could have additional inputs by the owners, by the stockholders. We're not at that point yet. We'll get there in a couple of chapters, but for right now, all we have is beginning retained earnings, the adding the net income, or we would subtract a net loss, subtract the dividends, and then you end up with ending retained earnings. So I think that if I put a Y in here, that will get us there. Now, let me see here. I'm going to see if I can just show you how these things all tie together. Now they've changed this thing on this one, so I'm not quite sure. Well, I'm not going to mess with it. I'll figure it out later. But anyway, at this point, just be aware that the 49.55 comes directly from down here. So you could trace a line directly to right there. The dividends came from the worksheet, and they're right here. Okay? All right. So that takes care of the ending retained earnings. So far, I've tied this statement to this statement, and now I've got to tie this statement through the retained earnings to the balance sheet over here, and that'll be down here someplace. So I'm going to put in those items as well. And again, these are coming straight off the worksheet. Usually we show anything that we're doing where we're creating a net number, we show it over to one side. I'm not sure that your authors do that yet, but it doesn't matter. I mean, eventually you'll find that you have to do that. So here are all of our assets, again coming straight off the worksheet, $99.45 for cash, $41.50, and so forth. And then down here you have your liabilities, and you have the accounts payable, wages payable, unearned revenue. There were only 3 of them, so your total liabilities were $12,090. And down here you have your stockholders' equity. The common stock is again from the worksheet. The retained earnings, though, comes from this number right here. Okay, so when I move that number over here, then I get it with total liabilities and stockholders' equity. And by the way, it wouldn't fit in my little box here, so I just said total liabilities and equity. But just be aware that if you were doing this on a formal basis, you would certainly have the entire words on there. Okay, so again, now I've got a balance, $24,295, $24,295. And I want you to notice something else now. On the worksheet, it's different. Okay? It's different on the worksheet, and that's because of the way that we treat this guy here and then the earnings. Okay? So, there you are. That completes chapter 4's problem. And thank you for your attention, and we'll talk to you later.